A chair. If you look at a chair, if you look at a bicycle, at a house, everything has evolved aesthetically and also to provide a better life. So the fact that the neck was rotating, I think it's a better life for the musicians because they can adjust it in half a second.
One of the things that's most exciting to me right now about the double bass world is the innovation going on in the double bass building world, the luthiers. And there's nobody that epitomizes that innovation more than Patrick Charton. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations. And I first met Patrick at the 2017 International Society of Bassists convention. And I watched jaw agape as he folded up his suitcase bass, his suit bass, as he calls it. And that is just one of the many innovations that Patrick has. He has this amazing bass called the B21, the double bass for the 21st century, or a double bass for the 21st century. And this bass, it has a detachable neck, comes off in 10 seconds. It has a body that can be used with a 4 or 5 string neck. It has adjustable string action. It has a removable head. The peg box is removable. You can have different strings on there. A self-adjusting telescopic sound post. An end pin that's adjustable by foot pedal, and a great sound. What? So, Pat, I had to get Patrick on the podcast. I just had a fantastic time chatting with him briefly at ISB. Of course, if you've ever been to that event, there are 10,000 things going on, so it's not necessarily the best place to sit down for an in-depth conversation. But here we are following up, and I just can't say enough good things about Patrick and what he's doing and just how he represents the innovation going on in the bass world. So you'll love this conversation. Totally fascinating. I know people love hearing from luthiers, and this one will not disappoint. We've got great sponsors for today's episode. We have D'Addario Strings, Robertson & Sons, and the English Double Bass Book. More on them later in the episode. But let's dive in with our conversation featuring Patrick Charton. Maybe we could start by talking about that. Is it the suitcase bass? Is that what you refer to it as?
Yeah. Well, I called it the suit bass, so it's a sort of a pun. It's a play on word because it's a suitcase and it's a bass, and the bass is the suitcase. So it sort of contains itself, it protects itself, and well, that's the whole concept. So it's ultra detachable, and it's almost like those Russian things that you put into themselves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh yeah, the nesting dolls, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I was amazed because I remember seeing the when it was all packed up and in that case. It was an incredibly small case. What were the dimensions of that case for the suit bass?
The suit bass. Let me see. I don't have it in inches, but if you have a second, I can tell you.
Sure.
I have it in centimeters, but here it is in inches. It's 9 by 27.5 by 43.
Okay.
So it's quite small because you not only take the neck off, but you also divide the volume by 2. So that's what makes it so small, because 9 is very small, and at the end it's a regular bass, because since it's into itself when you plug it to one half onto the other, then you have quite a wide, deep instrument.
Yeah. What's I remember it just being incredibly fast, getting from, especially looking at some other options you have for, travel bases and the like. How long does it take to go from being in the suitcase to being assembled and then getting back into the suitcase?
Well, when I started trying, it took me 4 minutes. I think now I'm getting better.
Wow.
So I think about not even 3 minutes. So you can assemble it. Of course, taking it apart is much smaller, much shorter. So it's not even. It's about 2 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, because one thing is that there is nothing to screw. That's one of the main things. I'm using the string tension to hold everything into position. So there is nothing to screw, and that I think that's the best idea I've had from the beginning, from the B21, C21, and is that you have a big strength. It's about 100 kilos of the four strings pulling on the neck. Mm-hmm. And I think the very good idea I had is to use this strength to hold things together. So it means that, for instance, I don't know if you remember, but the neck, to put the neck into position, you just put it on the body, and that's all. Because what it does, it goes under a special thing that when the pressure of the tension of a string is on, then it cannot move anymore. And it's the same for the head. The head, you just clip it on, mm-hmm. and once you put the tension of a string on, then everything holds together. So there is nothing to screw until it goes to position, because it's already into position and it holds because the strings lock the whole thing.
Okay.
And I think that was very clever. I worked with a friend of mine whose name is Jean-Luc Breton, who is very, very good at that. So both of us together, it's a very good team, because I have some of the ideas and he has the idea to transform the principle into a system.
You know, something that I remember you mentioning at ISB that it really, really connected with me, and I think this is true for all of your basses, the B21, the C21, is how you've sort of reimagined all the, well, you even used the phrase contemporary aesthetics. So could you maybe talk just a little bit about like the Baroque aesthetic, like what you're experimenting with in those elements that don't necessarily affect the tone of the instrument?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're mentioning that, because that's the very beginning of the whole story. We are in 205 maybe. No, not even 203 or 202. And I was thinking, I've been working into violin making, bass making for 25 years or 30 years, and I'm only doing things that somebody did 300 years ago, and it's, to me, it's very interesting to see what goes for tone, for music, for vibration, and what is just due to the style I was on at that stage. And the style I was on at that stage is the Baroque style. Yeah. So it's very complicated with all the scrolls, the very, very fancy things. And I was thinking that maybe if Strad would live today, he would have the same ideas as far as music and sound and vibration is concerned, but probably he would invent the instrument that goes with it, with the aesthetics of our era, mm-hmm. of our century. And this is much less complicated, because if you look at architecture, what do you call that? Furniture, things like that, chairs. We're trying to be as pure, as simple as possible. So I'm saying that if Strad would come today, he would probably use the style, the modern style that goes on in every field of art and technology, mm-hmm. to build his violin. So I try to put apart things that are really useful for sound, mm-hmm. like arching, because then you have pressure. You can have of course a flat top, or the fact that there are 3 volumes, the upper one, the middle, to let the bow go, and the bottom, things like that. But everything that's related to style, like the corners, fancy corners that turn, the scroll. All this, probably he wouldn't treat this way if he would come today. So I try to be himself, or I tried to be a modern luthier, only dealing with sound, and then trying to be as pure as you know. I don't know if you know this designer whose name is Robert. He's a very famous designer here in Europe. He says well, you have to be very modest and to stick to is just show off. And I think that's very interesting because this is why at the beginning I said, well, the scroll is something probably for aesthetics reasons. So the first thing I did is I would cut it because it's not useful, and it's very marked baroque. Mm-hmm. Same with the corners, and even with F holes, you know, in all the design of the violin, the curves keep on changing direction. That's something that really helped me, gave me a direction, is that if I had to change a direction, I would do an angle. And so that led me to an F hole, which looks like almost a moon croissant, and two holes, and nothing that goes on one direction would change unless there would be an angle. It's a point of view, of course. There are lots of possible, but I started with my compass, drawing simple lines, and at the end I came with something that was not so sophisticated, but it was probably pure, or at least more simple, and that's what I wanted to do. And so I started to then think of what are the problems of the musicians. What do they really need? This aesthetics. What would they need? And I thought they would probably need something to work on action without having to mess around with the gestures. So I thought, well, if I'd be light on what's holding the neck, then maybe I could have some kind of rotation that would change the angle, and that'd be very interesting. So that led me to a certain design. I came with the design of this. You drag, you go backward, and then the neck goes backward, and the fingerboard rises. And I think I wouldn't hide that because I was looking for a new aesthetic. So what's useful is shown, and step by step I came with the number 1 B21, which was meaning a bass for the 21st century, not the bass of the 21st century, because there could be a lot more. But my attempt to try to go on with the bass making or violin making, try to add something, and me sticking more to our times. Whereas, I already had several gold medals at that time, so I think I knew, and I'm kind of knowing what's useful for sound, what kind of arching I want, what kind of graduation, bass bar, angle, pressure. This, I think, I start to master, actually you never master it completely, but at least you start to know what you're doing. And so this act, of course, you couldn't get rid of all. This is why we need to be part of history because of this. But maybe we have a role to just go on with what the ancients, the old masters did, to try and keep on. And I always felt very strange with the fact that violin is a perfect thing and that you can't not do a thing, because that'd be very sad. But chair, if you look at a chair, if you look at a bicycle, at a house, everything has evolved aesthetically and also to provide a better life. So the fact that the neck was rotating, I think it's a better life for the musicians, because they can adjust it in a half a second. They do this, and then they have another string height, and then thinking of the removable neck, I think around 2 or 3, 4 there were not many people doing that. I think in the States. What's his name? Got problems with name. But so we met. I think it was in 2003 or 4, I don't know. It was probably in an ISB convention, and we were the two of us just in front of each other, and we proposed something, which of course was very different. He did something very different, but we really appreciated that. At that time, we were probably one of the first ones to start thinking of to ease the life of bass travelers, and. Well, my thinking went also on ideas that I finally dropped. Like, for instance, I was trying to deal with the wear of the edges. You see the fact that when you put the bass down, then you wear the edges. So I at the beginning I had rubber edges that I clipped on the bass, and I think that was nice because they would add to the shape, because those black things around the instrument was really interesting for the look. And also, of course, it was protecting the edges. So I think this was interesting. And finally, I dropped it because what I found is about the tailpiece. I think, once I got the removable neck, I thought that there was something wrong. Is that the fact that you had to untune the bass to be able to get rid of the bridge. 1 or 2 years maybe, I was trying to find a way to just get rid of the tensions just like that. And I finally found the idea, and that's in the tailpiece. So I imagined, and Jean-Luc helped me realize the flipping tailpiece. So the tailpiece, when you open it, it's like a suitcase. You open I don't know what you call it in English. And then you unlock the lid, and that's the same. You probably seen that. Otherwise, I can show it to you on a bass. But you open the tailpiece, and you get rid of the tension in a glimpse, which means that you don't untune the bass. It also means that when you want to tune it back up, you just put the pressure on, and it's tuned. So I think that was one of the clever things. And so what I did in the the rope that holds the tailpiece usually to the end pin, I set it to also something that I wanted people to be able to work on, and that's string pressure on the table. And then I went back to what the Baroque instrument proposed, and that's an anchor. You see in the viola da gamba, there is no tailpiece cord going to the end pin because there is no end pin. So they have sort of what we call in French an anchor, and which is sticking out of the instrument, and it hooks on it, and it's above the table. And I said, well, I thought that would be very interesting because depending on where at what height you have this anchor, you can move the angle that the strings do on the bridge, and so you're moving the pressure that goes on the table. With Jean-Luc again, we said maybe it'd be interesting to not have to take the string off, so that we invented something with a screw, so you can change the string the angle without untuning the bass, taking it off, change notch and everything. You can work on string pressure even while you're playing. Somebody screws or unscrews this part, and you can feel the difference between high tension or low tension. And since this was there, I didn't have to have an end pin. So then I thought, that's good. So with no end pin, the bass could hold by itself. I did this little hollow part in the bottom of the instrument, and maybe you can see it over there. They stand by themselves.
I'd like to take a moment and thank our sponsor, D'Addario Strings, a longtime sponsor of Contrabass Conversations. And if you have not checked out their Helicore strings recently, they're continuing to try new things. They go down to, I think, 10th size basses with Helicore strings. So if you have any young students playing fractional basses, smaller basses, Helicores are a great high quality option. And they're great if you are a jazz player, if you are a classical player, or if you do any sort of hybrid of those two styles. Their orchestral, pizzicato, and hybrid strings will fit your needs. I've used the hybrid strings for years, and they were great for just that extra edge in the pizzicato, but still having a nice bow response. I've also used the orchestral strings, and I've had many students and colleagues use the pizzicato over the years. They also have solo string sets, and they're in light, medium, and heavy gauges for the orchestral, hybrid, and pizzicato. So you will find something that works well for your instrument. D'Addario.com will get you more information, and thanks, as always, for sponsoring the podcast. And thank you to Robertson & Sons. For over 4 decades, Robertson's has been providing double basses and bows to students, professionals, music educators. They have a phenomenal instrument collection, and we have several basses that we're featuring. If you go over to the website, you'll see what they've got in stock right now, or a glimpse at what they've got in stock. If you have any opportunity, go to Albuquerque and check out their double bass showroom. It is astounding. I was playing on some basses from the 18th century, and I was like a kid in the candy store. I couldn't get enough, and I took them down to their recital hall. Yes, they have a recital hall at Robertson's, and played them. I was playing them on stage, and then I went and listened in the hall as Aaron Robertson played, and it's just such a fantastic way to try out an instrument. Go to robertsonviolins.com and get more information about what they've got available. And thank you for sponsoring the podcast. All right, back to our conversation with Patrick. I love how it both aesthetically what you're doing, because like you're saying, just like rather than being stuck in the Baroque, reimagining, just seeing what might, what those aesthetic elements and experiment with those. So I think that's super cool. It makes for very striking instruments. And then just thinking about all these ways for a player to be able to experiment with, like you're saying, string tension and height, and even something like not having to lay the bass down to get the end pin out. I mean, that's huge. That's a great, and being able to let the bass stand, and then also just the ease, thinking about just the travel needs of the bass player, right? So it's like you're experimenting these 3 fronts, and I just think it's the net result. I mean, your instruments sound great, but then visually striking, and just so many conveniences for experimentation with sound. And all of these experiments are in the B21, right? Everything you were just describing is in that bass?
Exactly, that's in it. And that's what I really appreciate from somebody like Robert Black, because, when he got in touch with me, and of course, it was in probably 2006 or something like that. And then from 2004, we were seeing lots of different various systems with detachable necks. And then he came to Paris. I showed him the instrument, and I think he was very, very interested by the fact that it's not only a detachable neck. He really appreciated everything that you just said, that you can really work on your own adjustments with the type of strings. It's very easy to work on string action and everything. And I think he also liked the idea of not hiding what's useful, and that this would lead to a new aesthetics. And this is something that I really like, because I'm not trying to hide my systems. Some of the luthiers do, and I mean, that's their choice. They say you can't see whether it's a classical instrument or whether but I mean, I'm not interested in this. I'm interested in the other ways, creating a new instrument from what we need, and what we need is new features to help adjusting, playing, and everything. And I don't want to hide that, because that belongs to the instrument. It would be like hiding the pegs, but the pegs are useful. So why would they hide it? It's the same idea. So it's my conception. I respect the other conceptions, but I luckily enough, I found people who like this idea. Although lots of people said, if I'm buying a B21 and I go on a competition, what would people say? Because it's not a classical bass. It's you with yourself. I think if you play good with a good sound, then nobody could complain. And actually, there was a girl at that time who was 19 years old, and she liked the instrument. She bought it, and she went into a competition, and she won the position of principal bass in the Lyon Philharmonic with the B21, which really proves that if it's a good instrument and if you like the fact of being able to adjust it, then nobody would blame you, I think. And well, those who don't want to take the chance, they don't, and it's respectable. But I'm proposing another way.
I'd also like to take a moment and thank our final sponsor for this episode, the English Double Bass Book. And this is a book from Tom and George Martin, both past podcast guests. They have put together, along with Martin Lawrence, a book examining the great English double bass makers of the 18th and 19th century, illustrating in fine detail the incredible work from these bass makers. This explores the fascinating story of how the double bass came to England, its development, guided by Dragonetti, and the rise and fall of the English double bass makers. It's quite a story. And if you go to theenglishdoublebass.com, you can pre-order your limited edition copy. All right, back to the final part of our conversation with Patrick Charton. And I love that you don't hide those functional elements that like the neck, because I think there's a real beauty to what you're doing. And it's like you said, why hide the pegs? They're a useful piece of the instrument, and I like the way that you're kind of evolving the bass. Well, it's great to see the success you're having with these instruments. And they're so visually striking and practical and just like real experimental in the best kind of way, right? And our mutual friend Lloyd Goldstein, just had his removable neck put on by you, right? That's something that you do for people too, right? You can take their current bass and put in your system.
Yeah, yes, because some people didn't like the steel rod and everything, and so they said, is it possible that you make a classical bass of your own or whatever model, but with all the features that you found on the and that you put in the B21? So I thought it was a very interesting question, because if I can do with the modern style, can I do the same on a classical instrument that's mine? So I thought, yes, I have to just replace this part, and I found with my friend again, Jean-Luc, how to cut the necks so that not with the wrench on the other side, but with a wheel under the fingerboard, the flipping tailpiece. All this was very easy to put on a bass. And so I started with mine, and then people started asking if I could do that on theirs, because since it's on a classical bass, then it could be on any classical bass. And so I did it on modern basses, and I also did it on a 19th century Italian bass. And that was very interesting to me, because everybody said, well, will the sound change when you cut the neck? Because neck, that does it produce sound? And my idea is that when you hold, you grab the neck at its bottom, don't hurt the sound. Of course, if you just touch the table, you will ruin the sound. But when you grab the neck, because this doesn't vibrate, that was the idea first, and it proved that it was true. And when Nicola Malagugini came to me, he said, well, I would like to do it, but are you sure that you're not ruining the sound? I said, yes, I'm positive. He decided to have me cut his bass, which was a very valuable bass, and all his friends in the orchestra, because he was a principal bass in Torino Orchestra, said, well, don't do that ever. Why would you do it? And he finally took the decision to make me do it, and I did it the way I used to do it. And he was just amazed and completely convinced, because he said, I'm constantly going from orchestra work to solo work, and you can't play with the same action, and it's really a mess to deal with the adjusters. And he wanted a bass that he could, of course, take apart, because his relatives were in Sicily, so he took the plane, and he said, well, you've got a solution for me, because I can work on action very easily, and I can dismantle my bass. And so I did it, and then he went to play to his pals in the orchestra, and they were amazed, because it's bass. I was saying that if you have a bass that you can take the neck off, then maybe you can come with another neck, a 5-string neck, and since you can work on string pressure, then you can have 2 necks. And so I made 2 necks at the beginning for people who were playing both. And then somebody said, well, what if I play 4 strings orchestra tuning and solo tuning? Then do I have to have another neck to not take the strings off? And I said, that's a very interesting question. What if I only replaced the head? So you keep the same neck, you take off the head, and you put another head with the strings already on, with the tailpiece that's flipping. So you just take it off, since there is nothing to screw, and replace it with the. I said, yes, that's possible. And again, we went into the system with Jean-Luc, and we came up with a very easy system so that you can have several heads, like one with gut string, one with orchestra steel, one with steel, and you only have one bass, one neck, and several heads. And from that, I even went further, and I did what I call a hybrid neck, which is wider than the 4-string neck, and which can hold either a 4-string head or a 5-string head. So the idea is that 4-string neck, then you have the 4 notches for the in the nut, and if you have the 5-string, then you have 5 notches. So at the end, you have 9 notches for the strings, depending on which head you're using. And the way it's done, it's so simple that it only takes a few seconds. It's so easy, and so you can imagine you have one bass, but you have actually 3 basses. You have a orchestra bass, solo bass, 5-string bass, just with one bass. And this.
You're solving so many problems. It's great. You're solving so many problems. I can imagine, like you said, having a gut set of strings. If you're playing some early music, maybe you're playing jazz gigs and you have some spirachords or something. You have your orchestra strings. If you have a 5-string setup with a high C, you could. I see it right now. I mean, you're solving why so many people have multiple basses. I mean, it's really brilliant.
Well, that thanks to the bass players, because they also gave me ideas that I had to transform into technical solutions. That's great with the fact that I'm working with musicians, that they have ideas, they have needs, and talking with them, I can focus on what they really need, and sometimes find solutions.
Patrick, thank you for chatting with me. Folks, check out his website, newly redesigned website, by the way, beautiful, at Charton, CHARTON-luthier.com. And that is in the show notes. By the way, we have show notes for each one of these episodes. So anything we talk about in the podcast, I make sure to link up to. So if you are driving or working out or doing the sort of things that I do when I'm listening to podcasts, you don't have to stop whatever you're doing and try to write it down. You can just go to the show notes, and the system I have is this contrabassconversations.com/the guest's name. So for this one, contrabassconversations.com/Patrick Charton. And if you enjoyed this conversation with Patrick, I've talked to a lot of luthiers over the years, and I will be talking to a lot more. And contrabassconversations.com/luthiers will take you to those conversations, and that too is in the show notes. We have a great app too. If you haven't checked out our app, it's a wonderful way to dig through this content, to save just the episodes you want to save, to forward them to a friend, to write into the show. You can do all that sort of thing in the app. contrabassconversations.com/app will get you there. And I would love to hear from you. If you have never written in, write in. I would love to hear from you. feedback@contrabassconversations.com will get you in touch with me. You can just say hi, suggest a guest or a topic idea or anything like that. That would be totally great. And get on our email list if you haven't yet. We have many, many thousands of people on this list. But if you're not on there, come join the party. We chat about what's going on in the bass world outside of the podcast. And it's another way that I try to keep you informed and connected with what's going on in the double bass world. And I mean world, what's going on in France, as you can see from today, Panama, as you can see from previous episode. We're going to be chatting with Diego Zacharias from Spain coming up here. So even though I'm here in beautiful San Francisco, California, and I do chat a bit about the US, I am constantly working to make this truly international, this show. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.